There's a boundary inside you that should separate what you want from what others want from you. For most people, that boundary vanished so long ago they don't even remember it existed. Think of it as territory. Early in life, that territory had clear limits. You knew what was yours and what belonged to the world outside. But then things started happening. Small requests, subtle expectations. Someone needed something and you said yes. Then someone else, and another. And each time you gave in without really wanting to, the boundary retreated a bit, so slowly you never noticed. There are people who reach 40 and look back only to discover they never made a decision that was truly theirs. Each yes was a small surrender. And small surrenders repeated for decades don't add up. They multiply. What starts as kindness ends as disappearance. The human brain doesn't distinguish between consciously accepting and automatically obeying. When you spend years responding on autopilot, the mind stops asking if you want this. It starts assuming you must want it. The mechanism is invisible but devastating. You stop choosing and just start responding. Like an echo that no longer knows where the original sound came from. Science has complicated names for this. Jung had his terms too. But the name doesn't matter. What matters is you lose track of your own boundaries. Your desires blend with others' expectations until there's no difference left. You become permeable. And permeable things have no shape of their own. They take the shape of whatever contains them. This doesn't happen because you're weak. It happens because no one ever taught you that saying no is a way of saying yes to yourself. It happens because life rewards those who cooperate, who don't create conflict, who make things easy. And you made things so easy you forgot there's something inside you that needs protecting. And then a strange question appears. What would happen if, for just 14 days, you refused everything you don't want? Not out of rebellion, not out of selfishness, but to discover if there's still someone underneath all those layers of consent, to see if the boundary can still be rebuilt, to test if you still know where you end. The first 3 days reveal something most people never had the courage to face, and that's exactly why they're the hardest. There's a type of pain that doesn't come from the body. It comes from realizing you built an entire identity around pleasing others, and now that identity is being dismantled piece by piece. In the first 3 days of saying no, something strange happens. The people around you react, not with violence but with surprise. Some are confused, others uncomfortable, and you feel this as betrayal, not theirs but yours. As if you'd broken an agreement that was never spoken aloud, but everyone assumed was in effect. The first refusal is always the hardest. It might be something simple. Someone asks a favor you'd normally do without thinking, but this time something inside you hesitates. And when the word no leaves your mouth, you feel its weight. Not because it's aggressive, but because it's true. And truth, when it's not habitual, always weighs heavy. The human brain was made to avoid rejection. Each no triggers an internal alarm. You're isolating yourself. You're in danger. That's why the guilt. That's why the urge to take it back. The mind interprets refusal as threat even when you know it isn't. It's an old part of you fighting against a new choice. For years, you convinced yourself those yeses were free choices, that you were being collaborative, flexible, someone people could count on. But in the first 3 days, the illusion breaks. You realize many of those yeses weren't generosity. They were fear disguised as kindness. And breaking illusions hurts more than breaking bones. Usually on the second day comes the temptation to quit. The feeling of being wrong is too strong. You look at the people around you and see they seem uncomfortable with this new version of you. And this confirms the fear. You're doing something wrong, you're becoming difficult, selfish, closed off. But while you feel discomfort on the outside, something different is happening inside. Your brain, deprived of the automatic pattern, is forced to ask again, what do I want? Not what would be easier, not what would avoid conflict, but what do I really want? And that question, asked for the first time in years, is the beginning of something irreversible. The first 72 hours aren't about becoming stronger. They're about rediscovering you still exist underneath all the expectations, that there's still a voice in there, weak perhaps, but present. A voice that knows how to distinguish between what's yours and what belongs to others. And hearing that voice for the first time in so long is both terrifying and liberating. Because there's a hidden mechanism that explains why you could never say no before, and it has a name. Your brain works like a muscle, but there's a specific muscle that weakens when never used, the muscle of refusal. Imagine a water filter. At first, it separates what's clean from what's dirty. Works perfectly. But if you never clean that filter, if you never say this doesn't pass, it starts to clog, first slowly, then completely. And when it's clogged, everything passes through. The filter stops filtering. It becomes just a whole thing's cross without resistance. That's how it works with you. Each time you say yes without wanting to say yes, the internal filter weakens a bit. The ability to separate what's yours from what's others fades away. And one day you wake up unable to distinguish anymore. Everything becomes one mass. Your desires, others' expectations, what you really want, what you think you should want. Science discovered something frightening about this. When you repeat the same decision 1,000 times, the brain creates a shortcut. It stops thinking. It just repeats. It's like driving the same route every day. At first you pay attention. After a year, you arrive home without remembering the trip. The brain put it on autopilot. When you say yes 1,000 times in a row, the same thing happens. The default response becomes yes. You stop truly deciding. You just repeat the pattern. And in this, something dangerous happens. You start believing that's who you are, that you're like this. Collaborative, flexible, that you like helping, but it's not true. You just forgot how to do differently. Jung spoke of a mask we wear to be accepted by others. At first you know it's a mask. You put it on in the morning and take it off at night. But when you wear the same mask for years without removing it, it sticks to your skin. And one day you try to remove it and realize you no longer know where the mask ends and where the face begins. Some people live 30, 40 years wearing that mask. They work jobs they never truly chose, maintain friendships that drain energy, live lives designed by expectations they don't even remember where they came from. And the worst part, they believe it was their choice, because no one forced them, but also no one asked, and they never learned to ask themselves. When you say no for the first time in years, not as explosion but as calm boundary, something changes. The filter starts working again. The mind reconnects the part that knows how to choose, and this isn't poetry, it's real. You feel the difference. Decisions become faster. Confusion decreases. You start knowing again what you want. But this change demands a social price, and many retreat before reaching day 7. When you stop being permeable, people notice, and some don't like it. There's a silent belief everyone carries. Good people help. Good people don't refuse, and you believe this your whole life. But kindness without limits isn't kindness. It's endless availability. And endless availability doesn't generate respect. It generates something different. It generates the habit of using you. The people around you got used to your porousness. You were the always available resource. The person who solves things, who says yes, who makes things easy. And now suddenly you're not anymore. And this creates a kind of discomfort no one speaks about openly, but everyone feels. In the first days saying no, you'll notice patterns that were invisible before. Some requests were legitimate, people truly needing help, but others were different. They were tests, unconscious tests to see how far you'd go, and you always went too far, not out of generosity, out of fear of displeasing. A specific request will come that will show this clearly. Someone will ask something that deep down you know you shouldn't do, will ask in the usual tone, expecting the usual yes. And when the no leaves your mouth, you'll see something in that person's expression. Surprise, confusion, maybe even irritation disguised as disappointment. And in that moment you'll understand. That request wasn't about needing, it was about power. Machiavelli knew this centuries ago. Those who never set boundaries are never taken seriously. Not because people are bad, but because respect doesn't come from affection. It comes from clear boundaries. When you establish one, some pull away, and that hurts. It feels like rejection. It feels like you're losing connections. But you're not. You're filtering, because there's a strange truth in all this. The people who complained most about your no's were exactly those who benefited most from your yeses. They weren't complaining about you changing. They were complaining about losing unlimited access. And when you realize this, something inside you changes. Anger doesn't come. Clarity comes. You start seeing who stays, who respects the no and remains there, who truly asks, not who assumes the answer is already yes. And these people, the ones who stay, create a different kind of relationship, more real, less automatic, because now your yes means something. Before, it was just the default. Now, It's choice. While the world around reacts, something much deeper happens inside the brain. The true reconstruction begins there. Between day 7 and day 14, the brain stops resisting and starts reorganizing. The brain has a strange characteristic. It molds itself, like clay that hasn't dried yet. Each thing you do repeatedly creates a path, and the more you use that path, the easier it becomes to travel it. That's why riding a bike becomes automatic. That's why you don't need to think to brush your teeth. For years, the path inside you said one thing: agreeing is safe, saying yes avoids problems. And that path became so wide, so easy to travel, you didn't even notice you were on it anymore. But now, after days of consciously refusing, something different starts happening. New paths are being opened, and they say something else. Refusing is also safe. Refusing is also choice. At first, these new paths are difficult, like clearing trail through thick brush. Each step requires effort. You need to think before speaking, need to feel the discomfort, need to endure the guilt. But around day 7, something changes. The effort decreases, the no comes out more easily. Not because you became harder, but because the path became clearer. You start noticing small but real changes. Decisions that used to leave you stuck now come out quick. That internal confusion between what you want and what others expect starts separating. It becomes easier to see the difference. And with this, the guilt diminishes. It doesn't disappear completely, but it loses strength. It stops being that crushing weight and becomes just a discomfort you can carry. Nietzsche spoke of something, becoming who you are. He wasn't talking about inventing someone new. He was talking about removing false layers and finding what was always underneath. The no doesn't create a different person. It reveals who was already there. Buried under years of automatic agreement, there's something almost spiritual in this. It's like a statue hidden inside stone. You don't build the statue, you remove the excess. Each no is a hammer strike that removes a piece that doesn't belong. And gradually the true form begins to appear. On day 10, something unexpected happens. You no longer need to think so much before refusing. The no stops being effort and becomes instinct. Not an aggressive instinct, but an instinct of preservation, of knowing where you end. And in that moment you realize this isn't a temporary 14-day technique. This is a reawakening of something that should have always been active. But what truly separates who you were from who you're becoming? The answer lies in identity. You don't become harder. You become more defined. Think of two versions of the same person. The first is like water. Adapts to any container, enters any space, takes whatever shape it's given, seems flexible but has no outline of its own. The second is like glass, has clear form, you know where it begins and where it ends. Not rigid but also doesn't dissolve, has weight, has presence. The difference between these two versions isn't hardness, it's clarity of boundary. For years you were the water version, you molded yourself to expectations, entered where you were called, occupied whatever space was left, and the people around you got used to this. They thought that was your nature, but it wasn't. It was just the result of never having learned to say where you end. Jung spoke of a process. He called it separating from the collective without isolating from it. It's paradoxical. You become more yourself, but not more selfish. On the contrary, what happens is your yeses start meaning something, because now you can also say no. Before, the yes was automatic, had no weight. Now it does. When you have clear boundaries, people trust you more. Not because you're kind, but because you're consistent. They know if you say yes, it's truly yes. Not maybe disguised as yes, not yes out of fear of conflict. It's real choice. And real choice creates respect. Around day 12, something strange happens when you look in the mirror. You see someone slightly different, not in the face, in the posture, in the gaze. There's something firmer there. It's not arrogance, it's presence. The feeling you're truly inhabiting your own body, no longer being inhabited by others' expectations. And the people around feel this too. Some are uncomfortable, others are attracted, but all notice, because you stopped being permeable, stopped being the empty space where others deposit their demands. You became something solid, something that occupies space, and this completely changes how others relate to you. The no didn't make you inaccessible, it made you real. And real people, with real boundaries, create real relationships, not those based on convenience or habit, but those based on mutual choice, On day 14, you look back and something becomes clear. You no longer recognize who you were. Not with shame, with amazement. How does someone live so long without knowing where they end? But what now? What happens when the 14 days are over? 14 days isn't the end of anything. It's the awakening of something that never goes back to sleep. The 14 days were an experiment, a controlled laboratory where you tested a simple hypothesis. What happens if I stop giving in? And now you have the answer. But the real question was never about the 14 days. It was about what you do with what you discovered. There are two possibilities in front of you. The first is to go back, return to the old pattern, say yes again on autopilot. And you can do that. No one will stop you. But now it'll hurt differently, because you know what you're losing. Before you gave in without noticing. Now each time you give in without wanting to, you'll feel it. You'll know you're betraying something inside you. And that awareness doesn't disappear. The second possibility is to incorporate the no as a permanent part of who you are, not as technique, but as ritual of preservation. And when I say ritual, I'm not talking about something complicated. I'm talking about something simple you repeat until it becomes instinct. Every time you feel your mouth opening on autopilot, pause. 1 second, that's all. And ask, is this mine or theirs? Do I truly want this? Or am I just avoiding discomfort? And if the answer is theirs, if it's just to avoid conflict, refuse calmly, without aggression, but refuse. Freedom isn't doing what you want at any moment. Freedom is knowing what you want. And knowing what you want requires knowing what you don't want. The no isn't negation, it's definition. It's you telling the world and yourself, here I end. From here forward is someone else. Most people never do this experiment. And that's why they spend their whole lives inhabiting lives that aren't theirs. They work where they don't want to work, maintain relationships that exhaust them, live at the pace others determined. And in the end, they look back and realize they were never themselves. They were the version others needed them to be. You're no longer one of those people. You now know where you end. And that changes everything. It doesn't change overnight. It doesn't solve all problems, but it creates a foundation, a solid base where you can build something real. The no is the beginning of your sovereignty, not sovereignty over others, sovereignty over yourself. The ability to say, I choose this instead of just this is happening to me. And that ability, once awakened, cannot be erased. You can ignore it, but it'll remain there, reminding you of who you can be when you stop giving in. The 14 days are over, but the question remains, who do you choose to be now? Now you've seen what happens when you rebuild your boundaries, but there's another side to this transformation. Knowing how to say no is just the beginning. The real change happens when you learn to think completely differently about every decision you make. Click on the video on screen. You'll discover how to reprogram your brain to think like a strategist, transforming each choice into calculated move, not automatic reaction. Click now on the video on screen.